Okay, I guess it is time to start. As promised, I'm going to show you a little bit about your TI84 calculator today. It will not be everything you need to know, but hopefully it'll help you out. If you find it useful, please hit the like button, and let's go. All right, as promised, I thought I would do a demo with your calculator. And so this is for your TI-84 Plus. I'm guessing it pretty much works the same if you have a TI-83 or TI-83 Plus. Um, Probably not the same if you have a TI-84, what is it, CE Color Edition or Business Edition or something like that. So what I have here is specifically a TI-84 Plus. And this calculator is actually probably about 17 years old, but it still works. It still works pretty well. So, right, this is your calculator. Of course, you know where to turn it on. You hit the on button, and there are several useful things about your calculator. This is by no means going to be an exhaustive how-to. I do have the manuals for your calculators on the blackboard, so feel free to use that. And in fact, maybe you might want to grab it before you follow along, so you can look a few things up if you want to. So maybe the first thing we should look at is the mode button uh, right up right up at the top. Right, so we've got this mode button right up here. Okay, and so if I hit that mode button, it brings up a huge list. Now, some people um, are wondering why my calculator shows in scientific notation, but theirs doesn't, right? So if you go into that mode button, you see mine is highlighted with SCI, and it just happens to be flat. The cursor is flashing on the normal right now. We could change that if we wanted. We could connect it, change it to normal, and so if I do that, right, I can hit the enter key, and that changes that to normal. Now, how do I make that? How do I make that stay like that, right? Well, in that case, then I can come up here right above the mode button and choose quit. So we have to hit the blue button first, so blue, quit. Now if I type a number in, so let's do something easy. If I go 5 squared, it gives me 25. Now if my calculator was in scientific notation like I usually leave it, right? So let's go back and do that. We can change that to psi. I'll hit enter. Okay, and then we'll quit. If I did the same thing, right? 5 squared, now it puts my answer in scientific notation, so 2.5 times 10 to the 1, right? So you can do it either way you want to. It should be okay as long as you know that you can go back and forth, okay? So the float, that means I get as many digits as my calculator will show, okay? And I think the TIs show maybe 12 digits, right? Show something out to 12 digits. And I usually leave it like that so that I can round off and do the significant figures myself, right? You could, if you're not getting as many digits as I am, or something is being rounded off, chances are, right? Chances are up here, one of these other numbers is selected. And so if I come over here, if I use the arrow button, if I come here, if I select that, right, that would say all of my answers will be to, you know, one digit or no places past the decimal, right? And I can change that. I can go all the way up to 9, right? I could change that. Or, like I do, I just leave it on float, um, and that's fine. Everything else on in the mode there is probably not really important to us. So I'm gonna go up and put that back on scientific notation. Okay, and then I'm going to quit out of there. Okay, and let's clear that. So that's how you can change. That. There are some other interesting buttons. Ones that we've been using lately in class, right? I've got the LOG button and the LN button. So if you're a TI84 user or a TI83 user, you're lucky. The LOG and the LN buttons are right there on the front of the calculator for you. But remember, you have to be careful. That LOG button is for base 10, and that LN button is for base E, right? So we could look on the iPad, right? So LOG, right? That's a base 10 logarithm. Base 10, right? That means like if I have 10 raised to some number, right? Base 10. ln, that's a base e. E, the exponential. And we don't use it a whole lot, except maybe in kinetics when we're looking at kinetics. And so that would be referring to something like e to the x. And if you notice on the calculator, and we can go back and look, right? If you notice on the calculator, above the LOG button, it's got that little blue 10 to the x. And so you'd have to use the second key to get there if you wanted to. Likewise, above the LN button, they've got a little blue e to the x. And so you'd have to, again, use that second button to get there. Now, when we talk about logs, both of those keys are pronounced the same way, right? So we have to be careful that we're taking it in context, right? So if I say log, well, then it's, well, what do you mean? Do you mean log LOG or do you mean log LN? Sometimes I'll try to be careful and say natural log when I mean LN, right? That's what LN means, natural log. Or if I just mean log, I might just say log base 10, or sometimes we call it a common log, right? So those are two important buttons that we use, okay? And then you can find other things, right? You can square a number, right? So we could go 5 and then hit that square key right there, right? 5 squared, 25, or 2.5 times 10 to the 1, right? Because I put it back in scientific notation. And right, it's sometimes it's easy. We should know that 5 squared is 25, but right, we might not know what 1.35 squared is. So it's just as easy. 1.5, hit the square button, and so now we know 1.35 squared is 1.8225. All right, times 10 to the 0. So right, it has its purpose. There's also the inverse key, right? X to the minus 1. Remember, x to the minus 1 is the same as, right? The same as x to the minus 1 is the same as 1 over x. So remember when we were talking about units for rate constants, we said, well, we could write seconds to the minus 1, but we said that was the same as 1 over s, okay? And it's the same way on your calculator. It's just a quick way, right? I could say 1 divided by 6, okay? And get an answer. The x to the minus 1 button, that's just a quick way of saying the same thing. So I could go 6 and then hit that x to the minus 1 button. So 6 raised to the minus 1, enter. Right, same thing. I don't know that one is faster than the other, but it's there if you want to use it. We should also point out, I forgot, when we use the x squared button, right above it in blue there is the square root button. So you can take a square root, right? And so we would go blue, hit that x square button to get the square root, and it gives us that little square root symbol. And now I could put in 25, close parenthesis. I know that the square root of 25 is 5, and so I should get 5 when I do that. And I do. I get 5 times 10 to the 0. But again, right, if you don't know, you know, you can go square root, maybe square root of 63.5, right? Okay, well now we know it's 7.968 blah blah blah. So it has its purposes. If you don't want to use the square root button, well, you can also use this caret over here, right? Because again, square root of x is the same as x little caret to the half power, right? That's the same thing. And so on the calculator, right, we could just say, well, let's see, 63.5, let's do a square root, so take caret 1/2. We know 1/2 is 0.5, okay? If we do that, we get the same number. So it has its purposes, but the real nice thing about it is I'm not limited to just square roots or squares. I can use that caret to enter any power I want, right? We could have 32 raised to the 5.2 power. Okay, that's what it is. I didn't know that. I couldn't do that in my head, but it's easy to do with that caret button. Okay, so those are some of the easy functionalities. Before we talk about the solver, though, we should talk about one last thing, and that's this button right above the comma. And it's a little hard to see here, I'm sorry, but it's the EE key, right? And so let me come back here. And so the EE key, and I read that times 10 to the something. That's what that means. So when I'm entering a number in scientific notation, I should use that EE key. Because on my calculator, if I have, say, 1.2 times 10 to the 3, right? If I put that in my calculator, you might be tempted to enter something like 1.2 times 10 to the 3. If it's just one number like this, that works, but that's a bad habit to be in. We can hit enter, and it tells us in the calculator format, but that's a bad habit to get into, because your calculator says that that's two numbers. That's 1.2 is one of the numbers, and the other number is 10 to the third power. So two separate numbers, and your calculator treats those as two separate numbers. So now if you use this EE key, right, the blue one right above the comma, that means your calculator treats it as one number. So I go 1.2 EE, so I have to hit the blue button. It puts that little E there, and I can go 3. And so I read that as 1.2 times 10 to the 3. But now your calculator says that's one number, and you can get in a lot less trouble by doing it that way. Okay? And so I would highly suggest that you get used to doing it that way. If you find yourself starting to be off by powers of 10, right? Maybe your answer is 10 times too big, 10 times too little. More than likely, it's because you didn't put your numbers in with that EE key, and you really should, okay? Now, the real beauty of your calculator is being able to solve equations. And some of you might know this already, but let's take a look. If I have an equation like x minus 3 equals 0, you should be able to solve that without your calculator, right? We should be able to see that x equals 3, right? That's pretty straightforward. But let's use that as an example in the solver just to show how it works. So first thing we have to do is we have to get to the solver. And so we do that by using this math key, right? So the third key down on the left. So I can hit that math key, and it gives us a bunch of things. And there are other functions in there too. It looks like we've got a cube root key if we wanted it to, or an any root key at number 5 if we wanted it to, right? So there's all kinds of things there, but that's not the interesting one. So I can scroll all the way down, and that little arrow means keep going, and keep going, and keep going, until I get to the solver. Now, the other thing is, right, it goes around, so instead of scrolling all the way down, I could have just scrolled one up to get there, and it puts me at the same place. In any case, let's hit the enter. Once you're there, hit the enter key, and it brings up something like this. It says equation 0 equals. So on your TI84, anytime you want to solve an equation, you have to enter it as whatever equals 0, or in this case 0 equals. And so on our calculator, we can use this button, right, as a variable. And so I'm going to say 0 equals x minus 3. So I've put the equation in. I hit enter. Let me get rid of that. So now, though, on the TI84, if I'm going to use the solver, I have to know a little bit of math. And that's the tough part about the 84, is you have to know more math to use the solver on the TI84 than you do on the TI89, okay, or the 92 or whatever. So in this case, now it says make a guess, right? So I have to make a guess. I know what the answer is. It's 3, right? We know that. But let's guess 2. Okay, so I put in a guess of 2. Now I can just hit the green button and then solve. So down by the enter key, right, I've got a solve in green. So I have to hit this alpha key up here. So we'll go alpha, solve. And there you go. It tells us that the answer is 3. Well, we knew that, okay? Now, let's say you want to put another equation in there. if there's no number in that x, I can hit that arrow key up as much as I want to, and it's just not going to let me. So if there's not a number in there, put anything in. It doesn't matter. Then I can scroll up and I can clear that and put in a new equation. Okay, so let's clear that. All right, so gee, we solved it. X equals 3. Okay, that's not bad. Well, how about if we try x squared equals 3, or minus 3 equals 0. Okay, I should be able to solve that as well without using my solver, right? Add 3 to both sides, take a square root. But let's use the solver just to show how it's done. Okay, so let's go back. So now I can put that in. So I use my variable key, and I go, and now I can use my squared key right down here, and I can go x squared minus 3. Right, so there's my equation. 0 equals x squared minus 3. I can hit the enter key, and that'll take me here. It remembers the last number that we put in. So remember, we just put in any number so we could get out of there. And I had put a 5 in. So it's still there. It says, oh, okay, you're still there. I'm going to leave it there. We know that it's probably not the answer, but it's a guess. Okay, it's a guess. And so let's just then go alpha solve. So alpha solve. And it says, well, there's the answer. 1.732 blah, blah, blah. Right? And so if we had solved this equation, right, we'd say x squared is equal to 3. And yeah, x is equal to the square root of 3 equal to 1.732 blah, blah, blah. Right? Same thing. Right? So far we've not done anything spectacular other than some simple equations. Okay? Well, how about if we make it interesting and we combine those? Let's say x squared plus x minus 3 equals 0. Well, that's a little tougher of a problem. And if you remember, probably if you're watching in New York State, if you're someplace else, maybe they didn't teach you this, but I think in New York State they used to teach you that stupid song about the quadratic formula. I hate it, but that's what it is. So what did they tell you? X is the opposite of b plus or minus the square root of b squared, remember b in this case is 1, minus 4 times a times c, all of that divided by 2. Maybe the song is coming back to you. I don't know. But now we have to know a little bit. We have to know a little bit of math. Okay. And so let's look. Right. This part here tells us there are 2 roots to this, or we'll have 2 solutions to this equation. And so let's write those out separately. Right? We would have x equals -1 plus square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times minus 3 all over 2. And we'd have x equals -1 minus the square root of 1 squared minus 4 times 1 times minus 3 all over 2. Right? Those are the 2 roots. And you could solve those, and that's fine. But what do we know? We know that the first equation, that first root, will be positive, and we know that bottom root will be negative. How do we know? Well, we have to do a little bit of math, don't we? In that first one, inside the square root there, it looks like it'll be what? The square root of 13, which is more than -1. And so that'll give us a positive answer. And the bottom one will have -1 minus the square root of 13. That's always negative. So now we know we have one positive root, one negative root. All right, so let's look on the calculator then how we can tackle that. So I've got an answer still in there from the last problem. We can scroll up. You can hit the clear button to get rid of that. And now let's put in our new equation. So we're going to go hit the variable button, x squared plus, there's that variable button again, x minus 3 equals 0. That's our equation. Now, the TI84 only gives you one root at a time. And that's where these bounds come in. If we scroll, we'll see that it says that first one is -1 times 10 to the 99. And if we scroll over, we'll see that it's +1 times 10 to the 99. In other words, right now, it's telling the calculator, look everywhere. Look everywhere. Well, we don't want it to look everywhere. We want to be able to know what those negative that negative and positive root is. So let's look at the positive one first. So I can change those bounds. So let's go here. And now you can hit your delete key, right, which is up here. And I go delete, delete. Oops, I didn't want to do that. I forgot where it deleted things from. Let's go here. Let's start over here instead. Delete 1 times, nah, I don't want a billion. Delete, delete. Let's tell it to start at 0. So now I'm saying look at all positive roots, right? From 0 all the way up to essentially positive infinity. Now, I've got a guess in here. Okay, I don't think that's the answer, but it is positive. Let's do this though. Let's make this guess. Let's say -2. Now I'm telling it to look from 0 to infinity. Look at all the positives. So now if I try to solve that, I'm going to get this error. It's going to tell me, hey, dude, that's a bad guess. Try it again. So in that case, you're like, oh, right, okay. So I'm going to go here. I'm back here. Let's get rid of that negative. There, +2. I'll guess +2. So now I can go alpha solve. And it tells me there's the positive root. And so one of my x values is equal to, let's see, it tells me 1.303-ish. And you can test it. Now, what if we want to do the negative root? Okay, so now we got to go back to the bounds. And let's go, so now I got to use that insert key up there. So let's insert -1. Where's my EE key? Use the EE key. There it is. 99. Now, oops, that's a little too big. Okay, now let's go here and let's go delete, delete, delete. Let's change that to a 0. Now I'm telling it, look at all the negative roots. Now I'm saying, look from -infinity up to 0. And again, now if I use a positive root, right, it's going to give me that same bad guess, right? So we got to make sure that we guess the right place. And so let's just guess, I don't know, -1. It's just a guess. I'm somewhere in that range, okay? So now we can go solve. And it tells us that it's the other root is -2.3 0, 3. Okay? And so it works pretty well, right? And so for quadratic equation, solving that, it works pretty well. But we have to know where we're looking and what guess to make. And so I'll finish with one more example. So let's go back up here. I'm going to get rid of that. But let's talk about the example first. Okay? And so there's our two roots that we calculated with the solver. Now, the last thing, when we start talking about equilibrium, we'll have to solve equations that look something like, maybe something like that. Okay? Well, it's still a quadratic equation, and we could do it the long way, right? We could multiply everything out, gather all the terms, and then solve just as before. But your TI84 says, all I want is an equation that has something equal to 0. Okay, I can do that. Let's subtract 0.357 from both sides. So I get x squared over 1 minus x, 2 minus x, minus 0.357 equals 0. Oh, perfect. Okay. So we can put that in, but now the question becomes, what guess do we make? And the idea is, we don't want this equation part with the x's there. We don't want that to blow up on us. And so if we look, well, down here, it looks like we don't want that to be, we don't want it to be 0 or negative, right? We don't want it to be 0 or negative. And so we would have to guess someplace between 0 and 2. Well, if we look at the 1 minus x part, we would say we want to guess somewhere between 0 and 1. So which one do we guess? If I guess in the 0 to 2 range, maybe I guess 1.5. Well, that means 1 minus 1.5 is negative, and I don't want that. Okay? So I would look over here, and I would make a guess then between 0 and 1. All right, so let's go back to the calculator. We'll enter the equation, and then we'll see how we can solve it. All right, so here's the calculator. Let's put in what we have. So here's a variable, x squared. Now, here's the tough part. If you were following along, so on the bottom, we've got divide by 1 minus x. But there's also something else on there. But it's still on the bottom of a fraction, and we can talk about math, a little more math at some other point. It's still on the bottom of a fraction. So I can just say divide by 2 minus x. Okay? Well, and then we still have the other part, so I have to take all of that now and subtract 0.357. Okay, there's our equation. It's in. It doesn't show us all of it because it cuts it off a little bit. But now we have to make a guess as to what we want. And we said, well, between 0 and 1. I don't know. Let's guess 0.5. Okay? So I'm just going to go 0.5. There's my guess. Yeah, I'll let it look over the entire bounds. This calculator gets a little slow because, like I said, it's probably about 17 years old. The newer ones are a little faster, technology. So let's go alpha solve. And there it tells us the answer is 0.510. Now, the only way that you get good at using your solver is by using your solver. Once you get good at using your solver, you will thank me. You can use this for the rest of your careers. Whether you're going to be a chemist, whether you're going to be a biologist, engineer, physicist, meteorologist, I don't know, probably not an English teacher, but, right? It works. It's easy to use once you know how, and so the only way you get good at it is by doing it. So with that, I hope this has been useful. You know, if you like it, hit the subscribe button down below. Hit the like button, right? Give me a big thumbs up, and that'll be great. All right. So until next time, wash your hands, wear your masks.